Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into the incredibly high-stakes world of oil and gas exploration and production, often just called the E&P industry. Specifically, we're looking at critical incident risk management. Because, in an industry where workers are handling highly volatile materials under immense pressure, we aren't just talking about your everyday workplace safety. We are literally talking about preventing the unthinkable. Let's see exactly how tracking specific containment metrics helps stop catastrophic, high-impact accidents before they ever have a chance to happen.
Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. First up, the high stakes in E&P. Second, defining primary containment loss. Third, tracking Tier 1 events. And finally, mitigating catastrophic risks.
Section 1. High stakes in E&P, the reality of the industry. To really grasp why these specific metrics are so absolutely crucial, we have to acknowledge the inherent dangers of this sector. The SASB standard puts it pretty bluntly. It says, accidental releases of hydrocarbons or other hazardous substances can also have significant consequences for an entity's workforce, as well as negative social and environmental externalities. So, in plain English, a failure here doesn't just put a dent in a quarterly earnings report, it directly threatens human lives, local communities, and the environment.
Now, it's really important to draw a line here. On one side, you have everyday workforce health and safety. We're talking things like slips, trips, falls, or localized injuries that are tracked by metrics like the total recordable incident rate. And those are definitely crucial. But critical incident risk management, that's an entirely different beast. It deals with tail-end risks. We're talking about the rare, massive catastrophic events, major blowouts, explosions, or severe spills. Standard safety metrics simply don't capture whether a company is actually ready to prevent a disaster of that sheer magnitude.
Section 2. Defining primary containment loss, translating the jargon.
So, the crucial point is, when investors are trying to figure out a company's ability to manage those massive tail-end risks, they look directly at LOPC. That stands for Loss of Primary Containment. Simply put, this is a failure to keep hazardous materials safely locked inside their intended pipes, tanks, and vessels. Think of it like keeping the genie in the bottle, right? When that primary containment fails, you've got an LOPC event on your hands. It is the ultimate red flag, a leading indicator that a critical risk management system is breaking down.
So why does avoiding an LOPC matter so much for a company's long-term survival? Well, it achieves two massive goals. First and foremost, it protects human lives. Full stop. But second, it secures the company's fundamental license to operate. Because if a company proves it can't safely contain its hydrocarbons, it's going to face regulatory crackdowns, intense community protests, and could quite literally lose the legal permission to even do business.
Section 3. Tracking Tier 1 events, measuring the worst-case scenarios.
We know what containment loss is, but how do we actually measure it in a standardized way? Well, right here in the SASB standard, metric code EMEP 540A.1 requires companies to disclose their process safety event rates specifically for loss of primary containment. This is huge because it gives investors a solid, hard number. It's a clear numerical look at process safety that cuts right through all the polished corporate messaging.
But notice that the metric specifically zeroes in on Tier 1 events. In the industry, a Tier 1 process safety event is a failure of the absolute greater consequence. We are definitely not talking about a minor, easily contained leak here. These are the major, worst-case scenario releases that cause fatalities, massive fires, or immense environmental contamination. By tracking this exact rate, stakeholders can see clearly how well a company is preventing the worst disasters imaginable.
Which leads us to a pretty massive question. We can track the failures, sure, but how do companies prevent these catastrophic Tier 1 events in the first place? How do they keep containment loss as a purely theoretical risk rather than a tragic reality? Section 4. Mitigating catastrophic risks, systems over chance.
The answer to preventing these disasters is that companies absolutely must rely on robust systems over chance. Safety at this scale literally cannot be left to luck. That's exactly why the SASB framework includes a qualitative metric too. EMEP 540A.2. Companies have to discuss the actual management systems they use to identify and mitigate these tail-end risks. And crucially, they have to coordinate these safety protocols across all of their business partners. I mean, a safety system is totally useless if it only applies to direct employees, but completely ignores the contractors who are out there turning the wrenches on the rig.
Let's move on and see how this builds in everyday operations. Integrating a true culture of safety takes a few interconnected steps. First, you've got to deploy advanced safety technology and constant monitoring. Second,
conducting really rigorous, ongoing training. Third, building a corporate safety culture that stretches all the way from the boardroom down to the rig floor. And fourth, ensuring strict regulatory compliance. These steps can't just be a checklist. They have to be deeply woven into the very fabric of the operation, from the initial survey all the way to decommissioning.
The standard actually highlights that the absolute most effective systems are built on one thing: empowerment. It notes that a strong culture engages and empowers employees and contractors to work with management to safeguard their own health. In practice, this is a real game changer. It means any worker, whether they are a C-suite executive or a temporary contractor, must feel completely empowered to stop work immediately if they see a containment risk. It has to be a collaborative effort, not just a top-down mandate.
Now, what's really interesting here is how the human element ties directly back to a company's financial sustainability. Preventing a Tier 1 accident obviously saves lives, which is the most important thing. But operationally, it vastly reduces production downtime. It mitigates the staggering financial costs of disaster response and litigation. And ultimately, as we mentioned earlier, it's the only real way to maintain the company's social and legal license to operate over the long term.
And that leaves us with a really powerful question. When we look past all the complex engineering and the dense financial reporting, is a company's safety culture actually the truest measure of its long-term viability? Think about it. If a company cannot safely protect its primary containment, can it really protect its investors' capital or our shared environment? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. I hope this deep dive into critical incident risk management has been insightful for you. Keep learning and keep asking those big questions.